Hello everyone and welcome back. In a few minutes we will be shooting at 5-gallon water jugs like the one you see here from a distance of 300 yards with a 5.56 and a 308. As you may recall, a few months back we did a similar experiment with a 77 grain 5.56, the 147 grain NATO ball, and a 168 grain gold medal match in 308. Even though I didn't ask anyone to click like, comment, or subscribe, you guys did all of the above in record numbers. I am truly grateful. Thank you. Well, the majority of comments were from people absolutely surprised and impressed at how well the 77 grain 5.56 performed. There was a group of people that were not overly happy with the results. Their ideas boiled down to three main points of concern. Number one, they felt that the 168 grain gold medal match could have done better if the cap did not come off of the water jug when being struck by the 308. In other words, the cap being blown sky high upon impact caused a loss of pressure and prevented the jug from possibly exploding. Number two, they felt that because the 308 was fired from a 16-inch barrel and the 5.56 fired from an 18-inch barrel, that the test was not fair. Number three, they felt that the speed of 2,913 feet per second from the 5.56 was simply not accurate. So today we will do a sequel in which we give the 168 grain another opportunity. This time around, however, rather than the 308 being at a 2-inch barrel length disadvantage, we will use a 20-inch bolt-action Bergara rifle. We will still be using the same 18-inch barrel for the 5.56, however, and to make things a bit more difficult for the 5.56, we will no longer be using the very best bullet that 5.56 has to offer. But 5.56 fans need not panic because we will be using the second best bullet that 5.56 has to offer. We will be using the 85 grain open tip match by Barnes, also known as their match burner bullet. In terms of what speed the 77 grain 5.56 was traveling at in the last video, some people thought it was faster than what was being reported and therefore could explain the carnage that it left in its wake, while a larger number of people thought it was only about 2,750 feet per second at best. They stated that it was simply not possible to push the 77 grain any faster if only using a 5.56. While there may be no way of knowing for certain how fast it was traveling, all I can do is to share the pictures I took of the chronograph after each shot. Here they are. We can also look to a third-party source of information, like this box of Hornady 223 that I found recently at a sporting goods store. If Hornady is pushing a 75 grain bullet faster than 2,900 feet per second, then it is well within reason to believe that Sig Sauer can do something similar with a 77 grain. Well, these are the two bullets we will be testing today. On the left is the 5.56 85 grain match burner, and on the right is the 308 168 grain gold medal match. You may recall seeing this picture in the first video. From left to right, you are looking at a 77 grain 5.56, the 147 grain NATO ball, and the 168 grain. Now let's see where the 85 grain fits into the mix. As you can see, the 85 grain is just to the right of the 77 grain. Notice how it is a little taller than the 77 grain, which helps give it a better ballistic coefficient. It improves on the 77 grain ballistic coefficient of 0.362 and brings it up to a 0.403. In fact, it is virtually identical to the BC of the 147 grain NATO ball, which comes in at 0.398. Here it is again in the middle. The 77 grain is on the left, and the 88 grain ELD match taken from a 224 Valkyrie is on the right. We'll take a quick look at the speed and energy numbers, and then we'll go right out into the field and see how this all plays out. On the left, you can see the muzzle velocity and energy numbers for the 308 when it was fired from the 16-inch barrel of the Ruger SFAR. On the right are the same figures for the 308 when fired from the 20-inch bolt action. As you can see, the velocity improved from 2,446 feet per second up to 2,588 feet per second. That represents a 5.8% improvement. The foot-pounds of energy numbers also improved from 2,231 up to 2,498. That's an 11.9% improvement. Well, here are the muzzle velocity and energy numbers for the 85 grain. When chronographing it, it delivered a 5-shot average of 2,653 feet per second which translates into 1,328 foot-pounds of energy. Notice that it is considerably slower than the 2,900 feet per second range of the 77 grain. It is, however, 10% heavier than the 77 grain, and with a better ballistic coefficient, it may carry the speed and energy better downrange. We'll soon find out. While considerably slower than the 77 grain, it is worth noting that it has a bit faster muzzle velocity than the 308, and it achieves that better starting speed while utilizing a shorter barrel. Well, here are the speed and energy numbers that the bullets will have when they arrive at 300 yards. We'll start with the 308. When using the 16-inch barrel, the 168 grain arrived with a speed of 1925 feet per second. This time around, it will have approximately 2,049 feet per second, which represents a 6.4% improvement. And rather than arriving with 1,382 foot-pounds of energy, this time it will arrive with 1,566 foot-pounds of energy, representing a 13.3% improvement. The 85 grain will arrive with a speed of 2,039 feet per second and will hit with 785 foot-pounds of energy. In the footage to come, you will see what happens when the 85 grain has a 2-inch barrel length advantage, which puts speed on its side, as well as what happens when the 308 has the barrel length advantage, which makes the speed numbers be nearly identical. In a moment, we'll be shooting this 5-gallon water jug from 300 yards with the 85 grain 5.56 by Barnes. Keep in mind that I forgot to turn on the directional microphone, so there may not be a lot of sound on this shot. It will be better for the 308, however. Well, I'm walking up right now to the 5-gallon water jug that was just hit at a distance of 300 yards using the 5.56 85 grain match burner hollow point from Barnes. Let's take a look and see what happened. On the exit side, it looks like a pretty clean exit right there. It doesn't look like much expansion, if any, from that hollow point. It blew that cap right off of there. Let's see where we hit on the entrance. On the entrance, looks like right there. So maybe about a 1/2 inch off paper at 300 yards. And no other damage that I can tell at this time. It lifted it about 12 to 18 inches off the ground. Maybe 2 feet at the most, but probably somewhere between 12 to 18 inches from what I can tell. In a moment, we'll be shooting this 5-gallon water jug from 300 yards with the 168 grain gold medal match and the 20-inch barrel. Well, I'm walking up right now to the 5-gallon water jug that was just hit at a distance of 300 yards using the 308 168 grain Federal gold medal match. It would appear at first glance that nothing is really wrong with the water jug until, of course, you get to the back side of it. And then you can see what's happened here. There is a massive exit hole on the back. And if you look real close, you can see the shot placement was about as good as we could really hope for at 300 yards, almost perfect shot placement. Let's turn that over and take a look at it. So we were obviously aiming for the diamond. We hit right there. That's about as good as what we can hope for. It certainly blew the cap right off of it. The cap was tightly secured, as they have been in all of these shots. Blew it right off of there. and blew the handle off the back of it as well. This is a picture of the water jug a split second before the 85 grain hits it. Notice how clear the water looks. This is the exact moment of impact without zooming in, also known as frame 1. Here is frame 1 again, only this time with the zoom. Notice how the temporary wound cavity is forming at the back of the water jug, the jug is lifting in the air, and the entire jug looks to be less than clear. In frames 2 and 3, the temporary stretch cavity is still forming at the back of the jug, almost like a pressure wave hitting it, and the jug continues to gain altitude. In frame 4, try to ignore how high off the ground the jug is getting, and try to focus on how large the temporary stretch cavity has become. In frames 5 and 6, the jug continues to gain altitude, and by frame 7, we see it reaching its highest point. Here is frame 5 from the first video when we used a 308 with a 16-inch barrel. This was as much lift off the ground as we would see. Probably between 7 to 11 inches off the ground would be my estimate. Now look at frame 7 one more time when using the 85 grain with an 18-inch barrel. Looks like 2 feet off the ground to me. In a moment, this water jug will be hit with the 308 from the 20-inch barrel. As a refresher, take a quick look at the exact moment of impact when using the 77 grain 5.56 from the first video. Look just below the orange target and notice the large snowflake effect from the high-speed impact. Let's see if we notice anything like that today. Here is the exact moment of impact with the 308, also known as frame 1. In frame 2, while it looks like the jug is rocking backwards, it is actually getting ready to lift off the ground, which we will see in frames 3, 4, and 5. Up until now, we have seen jugs either lift off the ground or explode. This would mark the first time that we have seen one doing both. For those of you interested in the 85 grain and what twist rate is needed to stabilize it, the box indicated 1 in 8 or faster. I was running a 1 in 8 twist, so I decided to check to see if these bullets would stabilize at various distances before making the video. We'll take a look at a few of those targets, as well as a 308 target to see what kind of accuracy you may expect to find from these rounds. I began the testing at 50 yards. The first 3 shots of the day were all touching, and so I purposely adjusted my point of aim on the 4th shot to make sure that I could find evidence of the bullets punching clean through without any keyholing. I then moved out to 100 yards, and here is that target. The first 2 shots were nearly touching, and so I adjusted my point of aim on the 3rd shot just to make sure that they wouldn't all punch through the same hole, as I was only looking to make sure that they were stabilizing as opposed to shooting for accuracy. This was at 200, and again I adjusted the turrets on the scope after each shot to ensure that we wouldn't have 2 rounds touching each other. Otherwise, this could have been a tighter group. On the day of filming this video, here is my first shot of the day at 300 yards. In a moment, you'll see shot number 2. Well, these are my first 2 shots of the day at 300 yards using 5.56 85 grain match burner. First shot of the day was there, second shot of the day was there. All I did was move the scope over 1 click and up a click, and they're just about touching each other even still. The following video clip is for the 308 and was taken a few days after filming the water jug hit. Well, I'm re-zeroing the rifle after shooting it at 300 yards. This is at 50 yards. I've cleaned the rifle since my last outing. These are my first 3 shots of the day. Just kind of walking the shots back in toward the X-ring. This is 147 grain ball on the top, and then these 3 shots right here is 168 grain gold medal match.